Just a quick little PSA. We have two upcoming live shows. The live shows are on October 9th, 2021 for New York Comic Con, and October 17th, 2021 for DC Fandom. And both of those will be available on our profile on Spreaker if you go to bit.ly/TMRPC. Again, that's bit.ly/TMRPC. If you want to support the show, the best way you can is through any of the books or current ongoing Vela shorts that are being released on a regular basis. The easiest way to find this is to go to bit.ly/TMRbooks, and you'll have links there to everything. All of my Kindle books are available for free. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you don't have to pay anything. You get it with your subscription. You can read them all. They're all in screenplay format. That includes Swan Song, The Muses, Duet, In the End, Our Past Does Not Define Us. Anything else that I've written that's available on Kindle, it's available there. You can buy a soft cover if you want. There's a hardcover collection of all of the Swan Song books, all combined into one. That's available as a hardcover. You can pre-order Echo Alpha, which is coming out in November. All of these things are available if you go on Amazon. But quick link, if you go bit.ly/TMRbooks, I have them all there, nice, easily cataloged. Also, down toward the bottom, we have the Kindle Vela content. The first 3 episodes are always free, and then after that, there's a token system that you can use to read. Even if you don't like it, just give it a thumbs up. That way we can get it up higher so more people see it. So one final time, that's bit.ly/TMRbooks, and every Wednesday there's a new Vela book that goes up. Taser and Acrobat, Nanite and Rosebud, Tales from Another World, and The Alchemist and the Illusionist. All go up on Wednesdays, and it's all available on Kindle Vela. All of this is available bit.ly/TMRbooks. This week on Beware of Spoilers, Scarlett Johansson has settled her lawsuit. How much did she get, and what happens next? Venom 2 has set the pandemic-era record for its box office. James Gunn has announced that he will be returning for a DC project that is top secret after Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and Russell T Davies is returning to Doctor Who for the next season for the 60th anniversary, plus Batman: The Long Halloween Parts 1 and 2, only this week on 30-Minute Reviews. Welcome to 30-Minute Reviews. I am Adam. So, some news to open up with this week. Not quite the busiest news week, but DC is gearing up for Fandom. New York Comic Con is happening this weekend. So, news is not at an all-time low. But to say that it's at an interesting height is, inaccurate. So let's start out first and foremost with Black Widow, or, Scarlett Johansson settling her lawsuit with the Walt Disney Company over compensation that, she is owed based on how the movie did and lies that Disney may or may not have made regarding said compensation. Now, to refresh your memory, in case you've forgotten what happened, because we haven't talked about it since the most recent thing where Disney's like, we should do this in arbitration instead of in open court. Scarlett Johansson headlined Black Widow back in May. It was supposed to come out the year before, in the immediate aftermath of Far From Home and Endgame, but pandemic hit, so Disney delayed. Movie comes out this May, and not only did it come out in theaters, but it also came out on Disney Plus as a premiere access movie, where you can pay $30, and so all of this is going on. So, movie comes out, does $80 million at the box office, which is not terrible, especially considering there's a little pandemic, but, movie does what it does at the box office. Then the next week, it falls off a cliff, and it does like $20 million in the second week, and Disney Plus, then another $80 million on Disney Plus. Now, from what I remember, Scarlett Johansson was promised a certain amount of the profits from the movie, and the movie was guaranteed a theatrical release as part of this. Now, because it went to Disney Plus, that cannibalized some of the people who would go out and see the movie in theaters, and therefore she does not get the money she is owed properly, because she's like, look, had this movie come out in theaters during a normal time, I would have gotten X amount of money. I'm not saying you should be paying me based on what was forecasted to be the box office in had this movie come out in 2020. I'm saying that, this movie was not, you diluted the pool by releasing this movie on Disney Plus as well as that, and I don't get the back end off Disney Plus. So it goes to a lawsuit. Disney says, well, we paid you $20 million. Like, isn't that enough? We're in a pandemic, and it's like you have a daily super spreader event in 2 different states across 6 theme parks, not to mention, outside the United States. And then it's like, well, you also did that, and it's like, well, you made $80 million. Everyone and their mother has and uses Disney Plus for Star Wars and Marvel and, anything else that's going on there, like the Doogie Howser reboot and all this other stuff. So it's like, really, you're going to play that card? Not a great look for you. Then comes the next thing where Disney's like, I thought we were supposed to do this in arbitration, not in an open lawsuit, so it should be dismissed on that ground. I guess that didn't go well because they genuinely believe that the lawsuit would be dismissed and it had to go to arbitration behind closed doors, that they would have let it go with that and not been like, hey, so, I know we said this, and we're probably going to win that, so let me just pay you out and call it a day. They paid out because they didn't think they were going to win on that front. It was just a last second, kind of thing. So they come forward with this new thing. They agree, we're going to go ahead and we're doing this movie. And we are happy working with Scarlett Johansson again. We'll be working with her on future projects, including Haunted Mansion. Tower of Terror she's doing. Tower of Terror is hers. So we're looking forward to where this goes in the future. So they worked it out, and she got an additional $40 million. Now that brings her total compensation up to $60 million, which still puts her below Robert Downey Jr. for Civil War, where he got like $63 million. But $60 million is still a lot of money. It'd be nice if she was able to get the amount of money headlining a movie should get you as the first real female character, the first female hero that Marvel had. It would be interesting. It would have been cool to have her do that, but, she's happy with the $40 million. Disney's happy with the $40 million. Everyone's happy with the $40 million. Now, I think that what this is interesting for more than anything else is the pending lawsuits going on with the estates of Ditko and Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and all of these other people who are suing to reclaim the trademark. I think that these lawsuits are going to be settled quickly, and I think that all of the bellyaching that's happened over the last however long it's been, over, what's this going to mean? It's like, it was always going to be settled, because it's like, the estate of Jack Kirby and the estate of Steve Ditko and the estate of Stan Lee doesn't have a production arm to make comics or make movies. So, like, yeah, you can own those trademarks, but, like, you have to go through the effort of licensing them or making the productions yourself. And it's like, is it worth that when you can just get a bigger payday out of Marvel? So, like, it was always going to come to a settlement where they're going to get more money, but, we'll see what it is. But I think that lawsuit's going to be those lawsuits are going to come to an end within the next few weeks. I don't think it's going to go too much further than where it is right now. It's just easier for everyone involved to just settle and call it a day. Everyone's happy in that case. Disney doesn't have the bad press of having to, be in this lengthy lawsuit with comic creators when there's increased scrutiny on how companies pay comic creators. And then on top of it, you don't have to worry about the and the comic book creators are going to get the better pay out of it. Which brings us to our next story. Black Widow was the first movie of the pandemic era to do reasonably well, making $80 million, which at the time that it came out, I was like, that's not terrible. It did better than Ant-Man and the Wasp, which came out right after Infinity War, was going to tie directly into Infinity War, had heroes who into Endgame, had heroes who were going to appear in Endgame in it, and it was, it was not a pandemic. So like it did more than that. So that was a pretty good sign. Then other movies started coming out and they weren't doing as well, and these were movies that were doing a hybrid day and date approach, and it's like, well, it's still not making the amount of money it would have had it just come out in theaters. And then Shang-Chi came out and did 60 or 76 million over 2 days, and then like 90 million over 4 or something like that. So it's like then, Venom 2 kind of moved up and said we're going to release in theaters. So Venom 2 came out last week. If you want to listen to Beware of Spoilers, you can hear my thoughts on Venom 2, as well as an apology for misinterpreting something that happened in Venom 2. I'm not going to get into it again, but Venom 2 comes out, does 90 million at the box office, which for some, I don't know what it is about the month of October where these movies come out that just continue to baffle me. Like, how the fuck do these movies come out and people love these movies so much? Like, Venom 2, I don't know, it's Joker, Venom 2, and Venom are the top 3 movies to come out in the month of October ever in terms of opening weekend. And it's like, all 3 of those movies aren't great. Like, Joker is, like, the most overrated movie in the history of cinema, I would say, where it's like, look, it's good for a comic book movie, and Joaquin Phoenix was on a great performance, but if you put in someone else and they don't do the performance that Joaquin Phoenix does, it's an utterly forgettable movie. That, if it wasn't a DC movie and it was just clown, not joke, we're not getting into this again, but I've done this rant before, not doing it again. Joker's overrated. Venom, I've never met someone who liked Venom, but apparently people do like Venom enough to go and see it in theaters. I guess it's like the voting for Trump of movies, where it's like the polls all said in 2016 that people were voting for Hillary because they were afraid to say it in person. I guess it's the same thing with Venom, where it's like, I'm afraid to say I like Venom in real life. So I guess that, that's why Venom continues to break records at the box office. But anyway, Venom 2 is not great. I'd rather watch a loved one die for 2 hours than watch Venom 2, or an hour and a half, than watch Venom 2. It's not a good movie, not entertaining in the least. And you can tell it, like, there's like the footprints of an interesting movie under it, but they don't ever come to the forefront. So who really cares then? But all that notwithstanding, it still made $90 million at the box office, which shattered records. And I think we can stop saying pandemic era, because, like, here's the thing. I think that Shang-Chi, I think that what we're looking at with the way movies are now is opening weekend is everything. And I think that if someone doesn't see the movie in the opening weekend, they're not going to see it in the subsequent weekends. So we're still going to get these fall-offs, but like Shang-Chi didn't fall off as much as Black Widow did. Like, Black Widow just kind of swan dived off that cliff, like she was trying to save all of, half the universe. Like, for Shang-Chi, it did bad, but, like, not quite as bad as, like, Batman v Superman or, like, the other movies in terms of percentage drop-off. If we look at where this goes, now, will Venom 2 fall off a cliff like Black Widow did, and, like, to an extent Shang-Chi did? I don't think so. I think that week 2 we'll see 30 million, maybe 40 million. I don't think word of mouth is that good on this movie. And I don't think that the post-credit scene being what it is enough to drag people into the theater. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes, but I don't think we're going to see the recovery of second week on in the way that people are hoping. Our next story is Doctor Who related. We haven't really talked about Doctor Who in a long time. So I used to watch Doctor Who. I got, like, the first season of Peter Capaldi is where I fell off, because, like, I wasn't a fan of the way Stephen Moffat kind of handled the show through most of Matt Smith. And then the next season opened up with, like, we're back in Victorian England, and it's like, oh, good, we're going back to the well again, and it's like, he can't write women. Women are always like plot devices in his stories, and it's not entertaining to watch. I couldn't stand Matt Smith, and Capaldi was cool, but I didn't think that this show was as interesting anymore, and then it kind of continued to fall off from there, and I haven't really picked it up since. I've been meaning to, but it's one of those things where it feels like a chore for me to watch. I just don't watch it. I have better things to do with my time. So, I did love 9 and 10, the entirety of, Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant's runs. And I feel like the thing that's going to get me back to the show is the fact that Russell T Davies, who was the showrunner for those 4 seasons, he's coming back to do the next season, which is the 60th anniversary. Not the next season. Let me rephrase that. The next season is still going to be Chris Chernell. I think is it Colonel Chris whatever the hell his name is. The current showrunner with 13 is still going to be there. Then they're going to move on after that. When he doesn't come back for the next season after, then they're going to go with Russell T Davies to pick up from there. Personally, I think this is a great idea. I think that going back to Russell T Davies is the way to kind of win back people who may have fallen off. Because I know for a fact I'm not the only person who fell off at some point during Matt Smith's run. Where it's like where during Stephen Moffat's run. Because I think that a lot of people thought that Matt Smith was too annoying. A lot of people thought that Stephen Moffat was too his stuff wasn't great. I saw someone describe it once as he's good at writing moments. Like a moment in the show that's like, oh, that's cool. That's going to be a really cool thing to happen. But the things that connect the moments, not good, not interesting, and not fun. And it's you can't build an entire show on, okay, we're going to do this at point. When you outline a script, you're like, okay, this is going to happen at 15-minute, or at the end of the first act, at the midpoint, at the end of the second act, and then, you do have to do that to an extent, but you have to make what's in between those points interesting too, otherwise there's no point in telling the story. And Moffat was never good at that. So I think that, this is a gesture of goodwill to kind of bring people back. If we're going to bring someone in to play the Doctor, new after Jodie Whittaker, that's her name, who plays the Doctor now. I'm not sure who I'd bring in. Prior to this, I would have said Benedict Cumberbatch would have been cool. I think that Idris Elba would be cool, with not a shred of irony, because he's British. And I feel like that'd be pretty cool to see him in that role. Maybe just if they do that for a season, that'd be really cool. But, we'll see where he goes with this. I do like that more recently, they kind of start fresh with each new showrunner. When Russell T Davies was on, he had his choice of Doctor and Companion. And he started out with the Doctor and Rose, and then the Doctor regenerated, and then he got Tennant with Rose, and then all of that. Then he leaves, Doctor regenerates, and Donna was the companion, if I remember correctly. She leaves too. And then Stephen Moffat picks up, and that's when you get Rory and Amy, and you get, Matt Smith. And then he goes through his stuff, and they start from scratch again when Chris, whatever his name is, picks up for number 13, and he gets a new Doctor and a new companion, which makes all the sense in the world. Because if you're getting your time to tell this long narrative story, and start out and do your thing here, it makes all the sense in the world that you would want to start from scratch with, you want to pick your person, you want to pick your companion, and it makes sense that would be where you want to start, because you don't want to have to deal with the, for lack of a better word, spare parts that your previous showrunner left behind. You're like, let's just start fresh. That way, when I am creating my take on the character, which fundamentally that's what the Doctor is each iteration has a different personality, different quirks, and all that stuff. So when you start out, you want to be able to build that from the ground up to an extent. You don't want to sit there and be like, oh, we're beholden to what came before us. Well, to an extent you are, but at the same time, you are, you should be able to do what you want with the character. And if you're beholden to, like, well, this is how Tennant acts, this is how Smith acts, this is how these characters act, if I just start fresh, I don't have to do any of that. Which brings us to our final story of the day. James Gunn, noted director of Slither, of Guardians of the Galaxy, of Suicide Squad for DC, has announced, or stated on Twitter, I believe, or on something. He said it on somewhere, and then comicbook.com ran the article. He said somewhere that after Guardians 3 and after the Guardians Holiday Special, he will be working on a top-secret DC project. He did the Suicide Squad, so where does he go from here? What's his next project? And I feel like that's an interesting thing because it gives us grounds to speculate. Now, I feel like if he was to do another project, and this project isn't the Suicide Squad 2, if he was to do another project, I would think he's doing another villain-centric movie. Maybe The Rogues, which would be my choice. If I got to do a DC Comics movie, I would do The Rogues. I would do Mad Love, the Joker and Harley Quinn love story, quote-unquote, for lack of a better word. I would do... who else is there that would be cool for him to do? I don't see him doing Superman because I do think the next time they do a Superman movie, it's not going to be Henry Cavill. I think that it will be JJ and Ta-Nehisi Coates' Val-Zod movie, which we keep saying it's Val-Zod, but it's an alien race, so there's really no reason why it can't be Kal-El, but, it could be. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you kind of want to... There's going to be pissed off people either way. So I could see them being like, look, just make him Kal-El instead of Val-Zod, because if we make him Val-Zod, it's going to, we're going to at least, like, people are going to be mad either way. If we do it with the comic black guy and not make the white guy a black guy, then it's going to lead us with less negative press, or less angry incels on the internet, more accurately. Which, by the way, can we just address Screen Rant for a minute? Like, completely off topic. And apropos of nothing, I've seen some of the worst reporting that's not from We Got This Covered or outright right-wing lying news sources in the comics industry, like Bounding Into Comics or, Doomcock on YouTube or Lords of the Long Box or Cosmic Book News or anything like that. Like, first of all, it takes them a week to fucking get this coverage correct, get the coverage incorrect as it is. It's like, they're like, could Shang-Chi be introducing a way to bring the Iron Fist? And I'm like, it took you a fucking month to do this? Like, come on. Like, you guys had the resources of Valnet, and you guys are taking a month to get to, like, that does seem similar to Kunlun. Like, it took you that long to do that? Come the fuck on. Like, that, there was another one that was like 9 characters from the DCEU who could be in Sandman, and it's like, well, we have the cast of Sandman already. Like, Tom Ellis could come back as Lucifer Morningstar. Like, no, he's not. We know he's not. Gwendolyn Christie's playing Lucifer Morningstar in this show. Like, oh, Matt Ryan could be playing John Constantine. Like, no, he couldn't, because we know that what's her name from Doctor Who, fittingly enough, Jenna Coleman is playing Joanna Constantine, both past version Lady Joanna Constantine and then Joanna Constantine of the modern era. She's playing both. We know this, and then it's like they do an article. It's like, why John Constantine won't be there. It's like, no, John Constantine's going to be there. There is going to be a version of John Constantine. It's just they gender swapped at the behest of the creator of the comic, who was showrunning the show. Like, what the fuck? Like, why are you doing this nonsense? And the other thing with that DCEU article, it's like, half people weren't even in the DCEU. And it's like it's just an excuse to write Wonder Woman in an article and be like Gal Gadot and like use all of these words. It's like when you go and you read a recipe online and the person who's writing the recipe is writing their entire life story before they get there. It's like I summered in Italy once, and when I was there on the Italian countryside, and I tried this pasta, and this is the recipe that the person gave me, and it's like, okay, cool, awesome, love it, but the only reason that that's there is to increase the visibility on search engines, and it's annoying, but like I understand it there when it's independent blogs who are doing it, and it's entirely dependent on ad revenue. If you're not able to report on something properly, where people are going to be driven to your article, then you deserve to be bumped down to the bottom of the search results. I'm sorry, I should not have Screen Rant coming up or Comic Book Resource coming up 12 times a day on Google News, where it's like, here's a bunch of nonsense click-through articles that always are the same thing, and it's like, well, who cares? But back to James Gunn and what he's doing, I don't think I have anything else to say on that. I guess, kind of went off on a little tangent there. But yeah, it's like it's such bullshit that people are doing this, and it's like you're just feeding this nonsense where it's like, oh well, it could be this. It's like, yeah, it could. Like, just as like I could like get into a fatal car accident. Like it's not likely, but it could happen. Like it's just so infuriating because like then what happens is like they run it, then some other assholes like an anonymous source told like, and that's what ends up happening is like someone speculates on Reddit or someone speculates on YouTube, and it's a channel that doesn't have a lot of viewers or someone who doesn't like a comment doesn't get a lot of clout, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and then they run with it, and it's like if you track like these scoops, quote unquote, that like we got this covered gets or like Cosmic Book News gets, it's like they're ripping off like Reddit. They're ripping like, oh, we have an insider at whatever the company is, and they said that like Avengers Endgame is gonna be called Avengers Endgame. That was the big thing before that, and it's like, well, no, you ran the article 3 days after someone on Reddit, like the top post, like there was a Reddit thread in 2018, like what do you think Avengers 4 is gonna be called? Because it wasn't announced yet. And then someone said Endgame, because that was a through line. That word is a through line through at least Avengers 2 and 3, where it's like and then on top of it, it's like there's the line Tony Stark has about like we can go busting up arms deals all live alone day, but that's the end game. Then comes Doctor Strange saying we're in the end game now. And then it's like, well, that makes sense. So someone pointed that out and made all those connections, and it became the top thing on what's it called? On that Reddit post. It was the top comment. And then I think it was Cosmic Book News goes like, we have an inside scoop. Like, we have an insider who says that this is what it's going to be. And it's like, well, no, you found it on there. Like, You found it there, and then what these sites will do is like they will make these wild guesses, but then they will take down the articles once these guesses are incorrect. So they look like they have 100% rate, but really it's like we're taking everything, throwing it at the wall. It's like if you're playing darts and it's like we're only going to count the ones that hit. It's like the ones that land outside of the dartboard we're not going to count, but we're only going to count the ones that land inside. And it's like, well, no, that's not how it works. You count everything. And then it's like the same person who said that like Kenobi is happening is also saying that like She-Hulk is happening and that Wonder Woman 1984 was going to have the Golden Eagle armor. And it's like, really? So you have an insider who works at, all of these different subsidiaries. It's like, it's not like, unless like Bob Iger is your source or like a very high up source at Entertainment Weekly who is really shitty at their job is your source, you're just blindly making shit up and hoping for the best. And it's like, look, you can say you're a good guesser, because, like, that's what we've done over the years, too. It's like, when I guessed how Infinity War was going to end with the snap, like, I didn't say I had an insider at Disney. It's like, well, the movie appears to be somewhat based on Infinity Gauntlet, and, like, if it's a 2-part movie, you have to end at the lowest point, at the end of the first part. So the lowest point would be Thanos snaps, and Thanos wipes out half the universe. And it's like, I didn't say, like, I have an insider at at Marvel, and they told me that this is happening. It's like, no, it's I guess I took an educated guess based on narrative beats in film, and it's like, if you know what the narrative beats in film are, then you can make guesses too, and you are just as insider as these sites are. And I think to an extent, like, they can't, like, here's the thing though, here's the problem, it's that outright lying is a breach of journalistic ethics, to begin with. In the same way that, like, if you write an article and you don't understand how a fiscal year works, I talked about this a few months back with the Eternals. It's like, oh, Eternals was delayed because they're talking about movies coming out in 2022. And it's like, no, they were talking about fiscal year 2022, which is when November is for Disney. Their fiscal year ends in, like, September, I think. So they are in fiscal year 2022 for the sake of their taxes and their business. But they're not physically in 2022 when the movie comes out. So it's like, people ran these articles, it's like, oh, Eternals was delayed, and then quietly deleted the articles when it was like, no, you're wrong, don't be stupid. And it's like, just write a retraction. Like, I'll have more faith in you as a journalistic source if you write a retraction than if you just delete the article. Because it's like, you're just hoping people don't see it, instead of being like, wait, I could have swore I saw that. So, yeah. So, but on top of that, it's like, if you're outright lying and you are getting income based on lying, shouldn't that constitute fraud? And I think that's an interesting question to look at from a legal standpoint, where it's like, if I tell you, hey, I have this car, and this car is worth however much money, and then I sell you the car, and I didn't tell you certain things about it, or if I tell you I have a car and I don't actually have a car and you give me money and I skip town, that's still fraud. And if you're getting income based on me clicking on your article because you lied about the contents, shouldn't that constitute fraud as well? So, it's an interesting question. I would like to see that kind of expanded on. But then again, like, if someone's lying about having a source, it's like, well, how do you prove that they don't have a source? Because it's like, it's an anonymous source, I can't expose them, otherwise they'll stop giving me information, is a valid, thing, and that's a constitutionally accepted defense for not giving your source up. So let's talk more about something a little bit lighter, now that we're done with that. Let's talk about Batman The Long Halloween, the 2-part animated movie that DC Animation has put out. So, The Long Halloween is an interesting story in that a lot of times when we talk about Batman, especially cinematically, we talk about Batman as the Caped Crusader who goes out and beats the shit out of people. But what Batman is in this movie, it is Batman as the detective. And it is fundamentally the origin story of Batman as a detective. And at one point he even says, like, I'm not a detective. That's not what I do. I am here to bring justice to Gotham, and I'm here to, to put fear into criminals and do all of that. And it's like, I don't do the detective work. And when he's going through the list of possible suspects for who Holiday is, he's like, this is not what I signed on to do. As when I put on this cape, I'm not here to solve these crimes. And it's kind of an interesting thing to see him develop this skill set and develop the analytical skill set that he needs besides just, I am the Batman and I will beat the shit out of you in a million different ways. Like, from this position I can kill you. I forgot what the quote is, like a million, like 37 ways to kill you from this position. And it's like, that is, this is building into the Batman mythos a new version of him. And the other thing I really like about it is each story kind of feels like, each month feels self-contained, and I really like that aspect of it, because it's something that works well in a comic where each issue is a different month of the year, or a different holiday. So because each one's a different holiday, you can tell a little story in each one, and it's like, well, here's him on Christmas, and what's going on there. Here's New Year's, and what's going on there. Here's Thanksgiving, here's Halloween, and here's what's going on in each of these days, as he's trying to solve this pretty straightforward, not a straightforward murder, but it's a murder of someone, who's not a supervillain. It's a crime family. It's an organized crime story. and I really like how it happens. Now, I do have some criticism more of the art than of the story, and it's like there are times where the like scale is a little bit weird on the size of characters compared to each other, and that's just because it seems more like the like it was quickly done. All of the acting is great. Jensen Ackles voices Batman. Troy Baker voices the Joker. The late Naya Rivera voices Catwoman, who has a pretty active role in this too. I really love all of it, and it's really cool. And I haven't gotten to the end yet. This is part one. I'm going to record part two tomorrow after I finish part two, obviously. And we'll discuss then what happens in part two. But yeah, like part one is all just straightforward. Batman trying to solve this murder. And I think that it's really kind of interesting. Some might say ballsy, for not a good reason, to end part one with no resolution or no real, like, not even resolution or being anywhere near closer to a solution to this problem. Because it's like they sold it as two separate DVDs for $20 a piece. And if I wasn't watching on HBO Max, I'd be like, well, I paid $20 for this and there's no resolution to the plot. But if you're watching on HBO Max, that's not an issue. So tomorrow we will pick up with what part two is. So now we reach part two of The Long Halloween. And I think this is the best way to really handle this movie. There's no concrete reason why this movie should have been split up into two parts. Like, when you watch it, there's no clear, concise driving force that demands that this movie be a two-part endeavor. Like, when you see Infinity War, which was two parts, you split it up into two parts because having people sit down and watch a 5.5-hour movie would be a lot. We sat through the Snyder Cut, which was 4 hours, but feasibly, if they wanted to, they could have done that as a two-part movie in theaters at 2 hours apiece. If they cut right after the Batcrawler sequence, or the Nightcrawler, wherever it is in the sewers of Gotham, you could have done that movie as two-hour movies. That's neither here nor there, though. But if you watch, this, where part one ends off is not something that really begs you to watch part two. And for something like this, where part one and part two are being sold as two separate DVDs, and you want to drive someone to see part two, you kind of want to end it in a place where there is some kind of jeopardy. So, like, had they ended it with Bruce Wayne being abducted by Poison Ivy, that would have been something that would draw you to the next one instead of opening with that in part two. That would have opened you up and had you do that. And the other thing is, they could have done this as 1 3-hour movie, considering it's not a theatrical. It was going direct to DVD and then to HBO Max eventually. They could have done it as 1 3-hour movie, but it just comes off like they were trying to double dip on DVD sales by having you buy both. There also isn't a clear narrative through line in part one compared to part two that requires you to reset between the two. Like, most part one and part two movies have a difference in narrative where there's if you watch them straight through as two independent things, you would feel like something was wrong if you watched it straight through as one thing altogether. Whereas, like, if you took Endgame and Infinity War and put it in as two separate, as one long movie, it wouldn't feel right because there's a clear partition between part one and part two. Part one is the story of Thanos completing the Infinity Gauntlet, going through and dealing with, basically the Thanos imperative, going through and getting all the Infinity Stones, completing the Gauntlet, and snapping his fingers. Endgame is the story of the Avengers not trying to stop him there, which is what Infinity War is, but Endgame is the narrative through line is the Avengers undoing what Thanos did. For Justice League, part one of the Snyder Cut, quote unquote, is finding the mother boxes and keeping the mother boxes from Steppenwolf. When we get to part two, that through line has changed, where it's like he already has two of them. Now we got to stop him from, like it works less for the Snyder Cut because it is still one long ass movie, but you can still cut it down and it's two separate distinct stories. This is still the same story. Like the story is still who is Holiday, what are we trying to do as what is the Batman trying to do to to keep Gotham safe, who is coming next, and it's like it really is not something that needed to be broken up into two parts to really differentiate what's on part one and part two. It's not like there's a clear turning point where the entire plot needs to twist after part one. So, like in its simplest form, the fundamental question that part two doesn't answer is, does this movie deserve to exist? And it's not that part two isn't a fulfilling end to the story. It is, but there's no reason why this wasn't one long movie. Like that's my real problem with this, is that they decided to split it up instead of doing one long ass movie and just call it a day. And it wouldn't have been that long, comparatively speaking, if you did this as 3 hours, especially considering it was going to DVD, and you can pause it, get up, go do other things, come back to it later. There was no reason why they did it as two parts besides to get 2 DVD sales, which doesn't sit right with me. That said, like, there's a story, there is an argument to be made where, doing this in this way really does lend itself to telling this story so in a way that's faithful to the comics, or we're adding in plot lines that make sense within the confines of the story we're trying to tell. But I don't think that, if we're going to do it and just split it off on the 2 DVDs, that's necessarily the best thing to do for the consumer. And I think really that's what my issue fundamentally comes down to with this. And I had a feeling this was going to be my issue after part one, when part one didn't necessarily end on a cliffhanger that needed to be explained, where it's like, it ends with like, we didn't figure out who Holiday is yet. And it's like, all right, cool. Like, that's no different from any of the other little vignettes that they told throughout the story of that go along with this story. And that's a big problem. So you can watch this on HBO Max. Just don't buy the Blu-ray or the DVD or whatever. Which I feel bad saying, because I'm always a big proponent of physical media. But if you're going to do physical media in a way that is designed purely to milk as much money out of the consumer as possible, which, to an extent, if someone's buying a DVD, they're already, spending more money on your product than they need to then do this feels wrong. But we'll wrap up there for today. You can watch Long Halloween on HBO Max. What else did I want to address with this? I feel like there was one other important thing that needed to be talked about. Kingdom Hearts is coming to the Switch in cloud mode, which means you need to be connected to the internet constantly. All the Kingdom Hearts games are going to the Switch, so that'll be fun for the 20th anniversary. And Sora is the final fighter in the DLC pack for Smash Ultimate. Who knows if they're going to develop another Smash game after this, or they're just going to port Melee, or whatever. But I don't think this is going to be the end of Smash. I think we're going to have more coming in the future. So, yeah. So, not much else to talk about. This Saturday is the live show. If you listen to us on Spreaker, which, short link will be bit.ly/TMRPC. If you go there, you can listen to us live on Saturday at noon, and we'll be answering all of your questions. So if you want to email in questions, and we'll be taking them all, the email is 30minutereviews@gmail.com. So it's THIRTYMINUTEREVIEWS@gmail.com. If you email in any and all questions that are related to, fandom or comics or anything like that, movies. We will answer any and all you send in. We have a nice crop already. That's why there's no listener question this week. Try not to make them too involved. We want to get as many questions in and out as possible. So questions like the what if question from a few weeks ago, while a great question that got on the show, is not good for a format like this where we have to sit here and go through entire plots of an entire franchise of movies. Try to keep them reasonably contained. And we will be answering any and all. I think we're going to do an hour, maybe an hour and a half, but that will be on Saturday at noon Eastern Time. Again, if you go to bit.ly/TMRPC, you will go to our speaker page where we have that. And finally, one final note, welcome back to all of our YouTube listeners. We will be trying to, get more content out there. I know a lot of our YouTube listeners are people who stumble upon this looking for old movies for free, like The Snake Pit and Caligula, but we will, go out of our way to keep you to see what we have here. So if you go on YouTube, it is it's all the same stuff we put on the podcast feed, but if you prefer YouTube, it's on YouTube as well. So until next time, have a great rest of your week. Do you like the show? Do you hate the show? Are you indifferent to the show? No matter what, you should probably let us know what we're doing so we can change it to better suit you, the listener's needs. You can go to either bit.ly/BOScontact, which is a contact form page you can use. Also, you can just email us directly at 30minutereviews@gmail.com. If you have questions that you would like us to answer, we can answer them on the air. We have a few questions every week that will be selected to be answered on air. So if you want to tell us what we should do, or if you have a suggestion for a movie or a TV show or something we should cover, go to bit.ly/BOScontact and also email us 30minutereviews@gmail.com.